Have you ever had a panic attack and you felt like you weren't going to make it and you didn't know what was going on? This is something that the guest of this podcast, Melanie, went through, and she was in a very competitive, busy industry of cooking, baking in New York City, and it's really wonderful to hear her story of how she learned about mindfulness and how she brings mindfulness into her mindset and practice of cooking and teaching others the art of it, of combining those two things. This is the Epic Kate podcast, and this is a place with wonderful conversations of people on journeys. This is a place to grow in compassion, in understanding, and in perspective. It was wonderful to chat with Melanie and to hear some of her story and to get some of her perspective. So let's jump in. Hello, welcome Melanie to the podcast. I'd love for you to give a brief just introduction of yourself.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, my name is Melanie Underwood, and I am a culinary educator and mindfulness teacher, and I am in New York, just outside of New York City. And I have been teaching for about 28 years, written a few cookbooks, and I love all things food and mindfulness.
Awesome. So you have a pretty good spiritual journey, huh? Did you have a time of a big shift in your life of going from not being in that space to suddenly finding yourself in that space?
I think definitely in my early 20s, I worked in hotels in New York City, and it was extremely stressful. And I was having a lot of anxiety. And I got to the point where it's like, I can't go to work. It was just like, I cannot do it. So I went and my mom sent me this study, which was at Columbia, and it was for Zoloft, which is a anti-anxiety depression medication, but it hadn't been released yet. And I didn't know if I was on it or not, but I did start having some weird side effects. So they took me off. But one of the doctors there could see that my anxiety it wasn't normal anxiety, it was really debilitating. I was having panic attacks. I felt like I couldn't leave my home. And he said, listen, why don't you try meditation? He said, it's not a cure-all for sure, but it's really going to help you with a lot of what's going on. And he sort of mentored me in a way with it. I actually wish I could remember who it was because I would love to say thank you, because he obviously started a journey and he taught me different strategies and techniques. And then I just started doing research on my own, and it made a very significant impact on my life, because I went from feeling very debilitated, like I almost couldn't leave the house, to being able to function. And in hotels and restaurants, it's very, very stressful. So I was able to use those techniques at work to really help me. And I tried to bring it to work, but nobody had any interest in it.
Right. Because it's like, we don't have time for anything but just getting the orders out and making sure people are happy.
Yes.
With your anxiety attacks, was it too much is being asked of me and I just cannot do 5 things at once? Or was it like future rooted? What if this goes wrong? What if that goes wrong?
I think it might have been a little bit of both. For sure, in the moment, it felt more like future in my anxiety. It was panic attacks, and I sometimes, and they would come out of nowhere. That was the thing. It wasn't, I woke up sometimes at night having a panic attack. And so they weren't necessarily, they were triggered often by something, and sometimes they were not triggered by anything I was aware of. I know that now that they can be triggered sometimes were things you don't know, like you see, you smell, you're using your senses, and something can kind of trigger it. And so for me, I always felt like, well, this is a great way to turn that around from something I don't know that may be triggering it to how I can have some control over it that can help me. Because, mindfulness is using your senses too. So why not use it to your advantage?
I just have this thought of a person. I've worked at a restaurant, but in the kitchen. I worked, I did wash some dishes in the kitchen, but running around delivering hamburgers in this American themed diner here in Sweden. but just that feeling of what it would be like to be having a panic attack while working, and the windows full of plates, and like what are you how to just like choke things feelings down to just give people their orders.
Yeah. I mean, so I worked in baking and pastry. I was a pastry chef. So I didn't work on the line, which is a very different feeling.
Right.
But
Still
I,
stressful.
oh, no, no, super. I mean, I opened the Four Seasons Hotel New York. There's nothing more stressful than that. But I was able to sort of walk away. I was able to say, I need to go to the bathroom. I need, I'm going to take a break. I'll be right back.
Right.
I never even thought about like if I'd had one on the line, what that would be like. And I know plenty of people do. And it is sort of stuffing it down and just doing what you can to get through it. But if you've ever had a panic attack, you know that sometimes you feel very disoriented and it's hard
I've
to get your
had
bearings.
I've had one, and it was like I knew that it wasn't in that moment of intense stress. It was like between it where like I was crying and I couldn't stop crying. It was just
Right.
like the volcano was going off, and I'm like, wow, this must be a panic attack because this doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah. For me, mine manifested in ways like I felt like I was going to die. There was a
Oh,
very strong
like you're like a heart
impending
attack
doom.
kind of feeling.
No, like impending doom. Like it doesn't matter. And I know that's common for a lot of people. It doesn't matter what's going on. You feel like you're going to die.
Was it like call the emergency room kind of?
Sometimes, yeah, definitely. I mean, there were times when I think I called 911 when I was 23 and they came and I was like, I can't breathe. And they were like, you're breathing. And they were like, you're having a panic attack. And that was before I went and did the study. And I didn't realize it was a panic attack, but yes, you feel like you're going to die, whether it's, I can't breathe, I'm having a heart attack, or, there's lots of books where people write about their experiences and they just feel like something is going to happen. They can't place their finger on it, but they're going to die.
So you have a big old heart for people in that food business to be able to ground themselves and and carve out their peace in the midst of that tension.
Yes and no. Honestly, most people in the food industry don't have zero interest in mindfulness. So I have a lot of training, especially with bringing it to corporations. And I really wanted to bring it to people that work in restaurants and hotels. But like you said earlier, there's not a lot of time and it's not something that's heavily valued,
Yeah.
so most places don't have an interest in bringing it to their employees.
Yeah. It's like, hello, preventative maintenance.
Yes. Yeah. But I mean, a lot of those places don't offer benefits. It's a whole cycle, and so for them, I think obviously larger hotels do, but some smaller places don't. And they're just like, hey, I'm just getting through the day. I can't get my employees to be mindful.
You must know a thing or two about burnout as well in that.
I mean, I fortunately never felt burned out because it's what I love so much that it just
Mm,
really thrived my creativity. So I never have felt burnout around that, which was
that's
amazing.
awesome. So, but I
Yeah.
bet you've probably seen a few people who have.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Lots of people get very stressed and are like, I'm out of here. I can't do it. And especially, women, when they want to have kids, it's so hard to work in a hotel or a restaurant because it's also not conducive to having that sort of environment where you're going to have children. You can't bring them to work. It's crazy hours. And I feel very lucky that I sort of fell into teaching to, not even have to worry about that.
Mm. So I had a thought and it went pew. Don't you love it when that happens?
Well, that happened to me today too.
Oh yeah, I found it. I found my thought. When you dove into meditation, how was that? Have you had any kind of magical awakening kind of experiences in that?
I mean, it was magical in the fact that it really helped me stop having panic attacks and having me be able to be in the present moment and not going ahead, like you were saying, and being futuristic and thinking about, the spiral that you get into on thinking, and just being able to be like, okay, here I am. And I recognize them when they're going to happen. I haven't had one in so many years, but I would be like, okay, I'm going to drop into right now being mindful. It was so just instinctive after I started practicing it because it was the one thing that helped me so much. And there are techniques that, you know, psychiatrists and therapists teach to people. One thing that someone taught me was to wear a rubber band and to snap my
Mm.
wrist. And that's a way of being mindful because that's keeping you in this moment. So it's a different way of doing it, but it's the same sort of result that you're looking for because that's keeping you here. Or, you know, someone once, a therapist was like, say the alphabet backwards, because that's the same thing. You have to think and sort of be in the present moment and to focus enough to do that. And now for me, I've been teaching for 28 years, and I always try to help people realize how mindful cooking can really help them because it's an activity that most of us do every day. And let's use it, you know, I think it's called habit stacking. Someone told me where you do something that you already are doing and then you use it for something else. And I think that's a really beautiful thing to do with cooking. And it also helps. I don't, you know, when I do lives on Insight Timer, people are like, oh my God, how are you doing 100 things at once? And I said, I'm really just using my senses. Like I can hear a sizzle, I can hear the mixer changing speed, and I know it's time to check it. I smell something in the oven starting to caramelize, so I know it's getting close to being done. And the little things that we're not really focusing on. And someone also said to me, hey, like for someone who has OCD, that actually might not be great. They were like, it might make it worse. But I definitely think it's about balance and really paying attention to what you have going on around you.
Mm. The way you describe that, it sounds magical, like a superpower in itself. Just,
Yeah, I would feel like it's a dance.
oh, wow. I'm so impressed because I don't cook. My husband does the cooking, I do the cleaning up. And the thought of having a bunch of different things going on at once, and like I'm good if I can keep one thing going, let alone multi a whole dance in the kitchen.
Yeah, I mean, many people feel that way too, right?
Mm. So how is it that you help people and you said you go to businesses and try to teach them about mindfulness and how they can be less stressed out in the kitchen?
I mean, that's one of the things that I do. My primary business is that I have a cooking school in New York, and people come here and take classes. And I taught at the Institute of Culinary Education in Manhattan for 24 years before the pandemic. And then I was like, you know what? I don't want to go back after the pandemic. Also, it just wasn't sort of in alignment with what I wanted to do because it's a school for people who want to do it as a career. People are coming there. They, you know, they have alcohol, so they're drinking at the end of the meal. They're wanting a different vibe. And I really wanted to focus on mindful cooking, and people just weren't into it there. And so I was like, I'm going to do my own thing, and whoever wants it is going to come. So I will go to corporations. I go to a lot of schools because I started shifting and working with kids when I decided to do this, because one of the things that I always heard from adults was, you've made a massive impact on my life.
Mm.
So I thought, well, if I'm making a huge impact on an adult's life, I could probably make a really significant impact on a young person's life who hasn't had time to do all the things and learn all the things that adults do.
And get
So
all jaded and get all
yes, exactly.
fatalistic.
Yes. So because of that, I go into a lot of schools and I work with a lot of teachers for professional development, teaching them how to use food in their classroom, in their lesson planning, and mindfulness together to not only help kids with anxiety, but to help connect each other. You know, one of my taglines is, when we cook, we connect. When we connect, we heal.
Mm.
Because healing is a very important thing, as you know, and we're not doing enough of it, and we're not doing enough connecting. That's definitely something I know. And my whole mission is to just connect people.
I love that. Connecting is so valuable. So I guess this is a little bit, maybe a little late to be asking this, but oh well. What is the difference between regular old cooking and mindful cooking?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it can be nothing and it can be all the things. You know, sometimes when people cook, they're just going through the motions. And maybe they're like, oh, yeah, I smell my onions and I love it. but they're actually not paying attention to it, and they're not really paying attention. They're just going through the motions. And I meet a lot of people who are moms who are like, I don't have time to cook. Boom, boom, boom. I need it done. I need it done. But it's actually an opportunity, especially if you have little kids, to bring them into the kitchen and have them cook with you and teach them the tools that not only is cooking, for me, cooking represents everything about life. Cooking is something that's going to sustain you for your whole life because we all have to eat. So you have to know how to cook, but then you can use it as this tool. And so mindful cooking is, for me, not playing music. I don't play music when I cook because I want to hear myself chopping. I want to hear the sizzle of the pan. When you're cooking, there's so many cues that are available to you about it. But if you're not paying attention and being mindful, you won't see them. Like heating up oil in a pan, it ripples in the pan back and forth. That's how you know it's ready. So if you're not using your sight, you're not going to know it's ready. Oil can get too hot. I mean, and then you're using your sense of smell to know that it's too hot. So those are things that I literally, when I cook, I'm doing the whole time. And one thing that people on Insight Timer tell me all the time is when I'm chopping, it's so meditative for them because that is a repetitive motion of something that you're doing. And you can just really drop into that and just do it and just I find it to be very calming for people. And then, like I said earlier, this isn't going to happen to someone who's not paying attention. But when you're, let's say, making cookie batter, right, in a mixer, it's mixing, and then there's a shift in sound because the ingredients and the way that they now are emulsified sound different. So just knowing, okay, hey, it's done. But most people aren't going to know that when they first start doing it. That takes time and sort of learning those sounds of when things are ready. I think that's the hardest for people, to hear the sound. But so when I go into schools, we will do a cooking class, but we'll do all these exercises around mindfulness and then talking about, hey, this is how you bring food into your curriculum. If you teach history, English, because not every school has a culinary program. So there are different ways to bring it into your life without actually having a classroom with food, with a kitchen.
Mm. The feeling that I'm getting from this is that it's like to fall in love with the little things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's true about so many things. You know,
Yeah.
I always try to use food as an analogy for other things in our life. And if we appreciate the little things about people, it's the same sort of thing. Like we're appreciating the little things that we have with food. And I do a lot with gratitude in food because one thing that I think people don't think about is how many people had to touch your food before you got it.
Mm.
It's not just someone packaging seeds, someone planting seeds, watering, farming. It's the PR person that's marketing your oats. It's the packaging of the oats, getting to the grocery store, someone putting it on the shelves. I have done a lot of research and there's no definitive answer, but usually it's over 100 people have been involved in getting a product to the store. And so I always think about the intention, and I send out well wishes to those
Mm.
people because I do believe in a ripple effect, and just saying thank you, all of you, for getting this here for me. But the other flip side is, because I know I can be preachy, that I don't want people to feel shame or guilt, because if other people choose not to do it, that's okay. I am about doing what works for you. And because I'm very mindful about it, I am aware of it. And that's why I do it.
Yeah. It's like you just take what resonates and leave what doesn't. And that's how I
Mhm.
take all of my content that I take into my brain is
Yes. But some people don't feel that way. Some people feel like, oh my gosh, I need to do this.
hmm. Yeah. When you were talking about the chopping, I was thinking it's kind of like ASMR, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I have some tracks on there because people were like, hey, can I get some ASMR? So I did one of washing dishes, one of chopping, one of a kitchen fan. And I don't remember the other one.
I can't imagine that this just goes across so many different aspects of life because food is so complicated for so many people and how they look at their bodies and how they and your and guilt in general of oh this is a reward or oh no now I have to work this off. Is that does that play a part in what you're doing?
No.
No.
I do think that people are drawn to me are not drawn to that
Mm.
because I don't talk about it. So in my in-person classes I have 8 people max. On Insight Timer sometimes I'll have 200 to 250 people on a live. So there's always going to be a person who has a feeling about food restriction. I shouldn't. And I tell people just what you said. This is what I do. Take what resonates with you and leave the rest. And I'm not vegan and I'm never going to be vegan. I don't eat a ton of meat, but I'm always going to eat eggs. I'm always going to eat honey. And so I am aware that that can be touchy and very like a trigger for some people, but I'm very upfront and honest about where I fall. And I say to people in my lives and in my cooking classes, like, you just need to be conscientious. I don't eliminate anything. I'm not eliminating sugar. I'm not eliminating dairy. That's my thing. I'm not about elimination. I'm actually about celebrating. And so people that come to me are people who usually are wanting to bring sort of more love into their lives and more celebration. And I try to do that through food. And I definitely feel like I can't do that when I'm like, no, don't do this. No, don't eat that. We're not going to eat this.
Yeah, that's not healthy. And like any mindset that's a big old no, then after you can only say no so much before you're like, and I'm gonna take everything.
Yes. I had a friend years ago. Um, I don't know how old you are. You might not know these. They're called Snackwell cookies.
That
And
rings a bell.
they were like the rage in the late 90s, early 2000s. I don't remember the exact time, but they were disgusting. And they are filled with additives, but they were low fat. And she wouldn't just eat one normal cookie. She was like, no, I'm going to eat these, but she would eat 10 or 12 of them. And I was in my mind like, if you just eat one thing that satisfies you, then you won't feel compelled to eat 10 of something that doesn't. And
Yeah.
I think that ties into the restriction piece, because when we restrict ourselves, we still want something. Mindful eating is huge. I don't talk a lot about that on Insight Timer because I do find that people, when they start talking about mindful eating, get very much like that. So when I do mindful eating, it's typically in person, because then
Mm-hmm.
Insight Timer, there's no back and forth. So I don't really know what's going on with people. And I always want to be thoughtful about what I'm saying to people. And when I don't know what's going on in their head, I want to be careful about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So what just like fills you up with the most joy and the most passion?
This,
This?
yes. I think someone said to me just yesterday something about sort of work, and I said, I don't ever feel that way because I love what I do so much that I can't wait to do it. Like, I think about it all the time because it's just so much of what I love. And I love that I grew up on a farm. I love that I had such a supportive family. And I love that food creates traditions and rituals. So for me, there's never enough time in a day to just do the things I want to do.
Mm. So did you grow up with all kinds of animals and all kinds of
Everything. Yeah, we had horses, cows, pigs. My claim to fame is we had 27 peacocks. I love peacocks so much. And we had this two huge oak trees, and they would roost in the oak tree at night. And people would hear them make their sound, the males, and they would think they were mountain lions. And we had everything: guineas, turkeys, chickens. I mean, my granddad, I don't know what I don't even know how that manifested for him. He died when I was 21, but he grew up on a small farm, but his parents died when he was young. So I think he just felt that it was really important. He grew up during the Depression, and that it was
mm,
important to have a farm to sort of sustain himself and what was going on in his life.
right. So was that your whole life up until you left home was helping out on the farm?
Yeah. I mean, it was what's called a gentleman farm, which is when you're not selling it, you're doing it for your own consumption. So yeah, my granddad, we just ate what we had. I always say I didn't try rice until I was a teenager because we didn't grow rice, so it wasn't something we ate. We ate potatoes because we grew potatoes, and my granddad had a huge garden, so we grew everything pretty much that we ate.
Wow. So always having a connection to not just the eating and the preparing, but also where it comes from and the earth in
Yeah,
general. So have you always had a deep connection to the earth and just feeling grounded and one with the planet?
I have. Yeah, my granddad was the same. I didn't know it at the time. He was really connected to the earth, to the moon. He used the Farmer's Almanac, which talks a lot about, I'm sure, yeah, you know what it is. So he talked a lot about, I mean, he read a lot of that and he used it in his agriculture plantings. And just, it was always something that was a part of my life. I've
I mean,
always,
I nod my head, but all I know is that it's like when to plant and phases of the moon. That's like all I can connect to it.
yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it. It's this really fun little annual teeny, it's a teeny little magazine that comes out. It has a monthly, it'll say January, and then it has all the phases of the moon. When is the best time to do all kinds of things, like get your hair cut. It's very cool, and the information that it provides, and then it has a lot of little anecdotes in there. And he used that, and I always felt so connected to animals and just to the earth. And I would go outside at night and just lie down and look at the stars. And I still do that. I'm one of those people that takes photos of the moon and posts them.
I love it. It sounds a little bit, and I obviously don't mean this in the derogatory sense but it sounds a little bit witchy.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. I don't think I knew that. It's something that I've come to realize that my granddad was probably very witchy. And I had no idea at the time. And because it just felt so natural that it didn't seem that way. But as an adult, and then meeting other people, it definitely feels in a good way, like that connection. And I feel that
It
way about
was,
myself.
yeah, it was like it was culture that was like we have to degrade this concept into this caricature of a tortured person.
Yes.
And when it's like it is so natural, and to be able to know which things can help, which things can cure you, which things are good for this health, like it's so sad how the concept got polluted. So I have the most respect for people who are like, yeah, I'm a witch, because it's like, what a way to stick it to the patriarchy, man.
It's true. It's so true. Yeah. I mean, I I don't, my granddad never referred to himself that way, but he was very magical. There's
Oh,
no question. And my
tell me
dad,
more. Tell me more.
I don't know. Everybody wanted to be around him. He was just had this very special persona, and he was very direct and very honest, but very loving. And it's sort of how I see myself. People don't always love people who are direct, but it saves a lot of time and energy. And I also always do things out of love. I'm not direct like you're an asshole saying that. I'm direct differently, but he was the same way. And everybody always just wanted to be near him. He just exuded so much positivity, but not like fake. And he was beautiful. I mean, I was so connected to him.
I bet he's so proud of you and what you're doing.
I'm sure he is. Yes, I am sure he is. And my dad passed away actually a year ago yesterday.
Oh.
So I feel like my dad also, he was the same, very charismatic. People love to be around him. I mean, I feel like my grandmother and my mom were, my grandmother was a little bit more quiet, but she was also witchy. It's something that I came to realize. And I saw a woman, her name is Deborah Hannah. I don't know if you know who she is. She has a company called Mama Medicine, and she has very interesting things. And I saw her once, and she's like, I feel like your grandma was a witch. And it was so interesting to hear, because I said, I always thought that about my granddad, but I've come to realize also my grandmother was like that too.
Wow. So maybe it's in the blood.
Probably, yeah.
Have you ever felt like you were doing magic when you were making food, that you were putting your love and putting your healing into it for the people you were making it for?
Oh, always, even as a kid. Yeah.
Oh.
So, I mean, I still feel that way. I had someone, I don't cater, but someone that lives here, she does a lot of retreats, and she was like, "Could you make food for us?" And I said, I don't really do that. And she's like, "I know, but I know how much intention you put into the things that you do." And she's like, "I would really love it if you could do that for this." It was a special retreat she was doing. And she said, people just reported back how amazing their experience was related to the food. And I don't think that everybody has that capability, but if they're intentional about it, they, can sort of cultivate it. But there is a lot of magic that can happen around food. And also
Mm.
the way you make people feel, when you bring someone into your space is magical, whether it's literally magic or not. It's a very magical experience for people when you make someone feel welcome and allow them to be who they are. I think that's where the magic lies, when you just allow people to be themselves.
And you just have this atmosphere in your kitchen of just, okay, we're gonna have fun while we do it. And there's you're doing the veg and I'm doing this, and people just, and it feels so good when you actually have a purpose and a reason to be together like that.
Yeah. And historically, people did do those activities together, and they don't today. And it's part of the loss of connection. So, in cooking classes, it can be really different. Not everybody that comes to my cooking class wants this level of sort of discussion. Some people are like, "Hey, I just want to learn how to chop a carrot and go home and make my kids dinner." But, a lot of people definitely are looking for that. I live outside of New York City. It's a place where it's a lot of people are not in touch with that side.
Mm. Does that hurt to know that people are missing out so much? And
I mean, I definitely think for them, it's a detriment. But for me, I just am like, you know what? I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And I know that every word spoken helps someone, even if it's just minor, it starts to help them hear and realize and sort of go to a different space. Those are important little nuggets giving them.
yeah. So, like, what is the best comment that someone could give you from attending one of your classes or attending your Insight Timer streams or whatnot?
Well, that's really funny that you ask, because I got this thank you card, and I'm
Ooh.
going to tell you because it literally was the best thing. That I loved what she said. She said, "I'm so grateful for your kind and generous heart and spirit. Thank you for your support and the ways you so effortlessly encourage us all just by being you." So that is the best compliment that anybody can give me, is to say that I've helped them just by being myself and showing people that showing up as who you are is okay.
And you're going to keep that forever and tape it to your mirror, huh?
I from teaching so long, and I think this is important, I have thousands of thank you cards, and I have a wall of them, because I think for me, that's important. I want to know I'm making a difference. If I'm not making a difference, I'm questioning my existence.
Mm.
So I always keep every thank you note that anyone has ever given me from a class.
Oh, I'd love to see that wall. That's
Yeah.
awesome. That is so, so, so cool. Is there any last thing that you would like to say to people watching this
I think,
or listening?
just remember that food can bring a lot of love. And whether you're alone or you have a family, sort of embracing that and bringing it to your life and knowing how really beautiful it can be for you. And just allowing that magic to happen for yourself and not putting boundaries around it.
Mm, love it. Well, thank you so much for taking this time and sharing your heart. And the way that I end my conversations is I give hugs.
Aw, a giant hug to you.
Hugs. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, what a wonderful conversation. Do you feel inspired to be more mindful in the kitchen? Let me know in the comments. And if you'd like to connect with Melanie and follow her on Insight Timer, that app over there, All the links of ways that you can connect are down below in the description. There really is so much more than getting through the day and doing the necessities and not even being aware of what's going on under the surface. And that's the theme that's been really going through my head lately in my inner journey, is asking myself, what do I really need, and assuring myself that I am doing my best. And I hope that you can take that with you today as well, to be mindful, to give yourself the gift of listening to yourself and the gift of quiet. But thank you for being here. Look out for the next wonderful, epic episode, and feel free to share this along with someone that you think could benefit from it. But I still have a little bit more to say, so I hope you'll stick around for this. If you'd like to connect with me and get encouraging thoughts towards your creative goal, I have a website called clearingthecreative.com. It's connected to a second podcast I have called Clearing the Creative, and it's where I help people to get through those blocks of what it is that they want to do, to work through the inner struggles, but also to give something practical that they can do right now to get inspiration, to get action. And I'd love for you to check that out. clearingthecreative.com. But this has been the Epic Kate podcast, and I'm so happy you're joining me on this journey to look for the joy and the magic and the wonderful in the mundane, and to make life more epic.